from now. And then afterwards, after we've shared, we'll have a discussion. You can either comment in the box or just flag up and we'll unmute as we go. So before we start,
the group chat's disabled.
Oh, is it? Ah. Sorry, that's there we go. It's my fault. Okay, so before we start, let's pray. Father God, we thank you that you are an awesome God. Father, we pray that you will teach us to experience you in a new way. Father, we pray that you would give us divine creativity in how we connect with our church communities and communities around us. Would you be with us and inspire us in this time we share together? In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so hopefully you should all see the screen. So we're going to be looking this afternoon at creating a virtual community that continues after lockdown. Oh, it's not going to like me today. So what are we learning? Well, we're learning several things. One of the things that I've heard said a lot is that a virtual community is a valid community. And I want to say amen to that and echo that. That's been the case for quite a long time, but as churches, we take a while to cotton on to these things. And so it's great that we're now recognizing that a virtual space is a valid space. It's a space where lots of people inhabit. What I'm also hearing from churches and leaders is that change is being responded to well. This is my 13th year in pastoral ministry, and I seem to have spent a lot of time trying to instigate change. And yet in the past few months, I've seen how adaptable congregations are, how quickly they will respond to change, which is fascinating. And people are finding ways of accessing online, whereas before they may have thought that's not for me. Out of necessity, now lots of different generations of people are accessing online. What's also fascinating is that millennials and Generation Z are accessing and becoming far more involved. So those millennials and Generation Z, which were in our churches anyway, are tending to be getting involved in the services. Some of that is purely out of the skill set they have, and some of it is it's a more comfortable space for them to inhabit. We also are noticing as leaders and ministers, we're actually more happy to ask people to get involved, and people are more happy to be involved. So some of that may need exploring. Also, research recently that's been done has said that actually, I think it's 1 in 3 millennials have stumbled across an online service. So that's an interesting statistic as well. And churches are finding a space that works for them, whether that's a multi-platform space or whether it's just WhatsApp, Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, one of those. But what's fascinating is we're seeing now these trends that before were confined to maybe millennials and Generation Z are now across all of us. So we're erasing that line between offline and online worlds. And we've seen this in our culture of work in secular settings where people will check emails before going into the office, people will work from home. There's a blurring of balances and worlds. And this has absolutely been catapulted in the past few months. So what's the challenge? Well, the challenge for us is keeping a community that has an ability to connect. As churches, we've been using technology to bridge a gap. And that gap is we can't meet. So we've filled it. But actually moving on from this, there's a gap between what we do in kind of offline space and what we do online space. And how do we grapple with that and bridge that gap? How does pastoral care work in a digital world? For some of us, pastoral care is that model of going and visiting, seeing. We've learned quite quickly that we can do some of that over the phone and online. But let's not forget that a lot of people are more comfortable online anyway. Some people will prefer to have a text conversation with you via Messenger, WhatsApp, or another platform than meeting face to face. Both are valid. One's not better than the other. We're also going to explore a bit later on, it's got its own kind of slide, the use of social media going forward. I think initially when social media, when churches started to use social media, it was very much used as almost a digital notice board rather than a means of engaging in community. We have to really consider, do we use the virtual world just to access those inside the church or engage in new ways within the community around us? If we're honest, a lot of maybe what we've done in the past couple of weeks out of necessity has been about providing something online for those who are in the church. But how do we build on that so it's not just about our church and membership focus, but also about our extended communities where we are? The real take home that I want to impress on you this afternoon is that technology is a language and not a tool. So often we use it as a means, it's a way of communicating, but actually it's a valid form of communication within itself. And so what are the practical kind of strategies? Well, an online community isn't just an add-on, it's an authentic community. So some of us for many years would have been, say, uploading sermons on our websites and so forth. And that's a great add-on for those that can't make it. But transforming that into an authentic community looks like a discussion, engaging with it. What we're noticing at the moment, which is fascinating, which we would never do, or I, would never do on a Sunday morning within church, is kind of put something out there and then go, well, how was that? Give me your feedback, get involved. We're becoming braver as church leaders in that. But that's the key that we need to keep to nurture community. It's not just about absorbing information. What's fascinating is lots of ministers will see how many views they've got in all the different platforms they're using. What I did a few weeks ago was actually look at the retention figures. They show two very different things because there's so much content out there. People are skipping. I was chatting to someone not in this association, in another association, and they said they were getting over 200 views. They went into retention and found out that about 20 minutes into the service, everyone drops out. I foolishly asked, well, what happens at the 20 minutes mark? And you could feel this person deflate as they went, I start preaching. There's something in it about how we use the time that we get. Those people may have gone back and watched the sermon, but actually how do we, if average retention is 15 to 20 minutes, how do we make sure those 15 to 20 minutes is meaningful and getting across what we want while creating a community? We need to invest in an authentic online expression. And this is really key. How well does your online expression provide the same experience as your offline traditional expression? Now, it may be moving forward, actually a decision within your church is made that we're going to build an online congregation and a physical congregation, and they're two very separate things. However, if you're trying to combine your offline and online congregations as one, what you present in social media has to be reflective of what you are. It's no good having pictures on your website and everything plastered of young people worshipping if there are no young people in your church. It has to be reflective of where you are. I would argue that technology is now the new Sunday. And we need to look at and explore in your individual context what that may look like. People may not want to rush back to a Sunday morning. People may like and be getting fed from what they've got now. So how do we learn to embrace what we're learning now in order for it to sustain? I'm toying with the idea, I'm also part-time in a local church. I'm toying with the idea of not having a service, putting all the stuff out there, but on a Sunday gathering just for refreshments, just for meeting and being together. I don't know how well that would go down, but it's just something I'm thinking about. One thing that is really key in social media is telling your story. Your story is important. When we're looking around at lots of different churches, I have thousands of churches at my fingertips. I can cherry pick what I want to view and see and engage with. And therefore, when I access something online, when people access stuff online, they want to be able to know what your values are, what your cultures are, what I need to get a grip of who you are. That will draw me into a community far more than the Sunday sermon, understanding the stories. Authenticity always triumphs excellence. There's nothing worse than when we're online and in other platforms as kind of putting a nice, cool, trendy veneer on stuff. But actually, as soon as you've enticed people in under the veneer, it's the same old traditional stuff. So we have to, the tendency is we could try and go, well, actually, I can edit all this stuff on my computer. I can make all this cool looking stuff, download all the images. But actually, if it's just surface stuff, it's not going to get very far. Even if it may not look the most perfected, bit of social media or website, if it's authentic to who you are, people will be drawn to that. People don't have the same common courtesies that we do in normal life when we meet face to face and can nod and smile. Online, they will just click away. So are we creating online community as intentionally as we do through Sundays and offline options? This again is the next step to building a virtual community. We've said for many years, haven't we, Sunday mornings isn't enough. We have to have small groups, we have to have discipleship groups, we have to have courses and stuff for people to access what we're sharing. Are we intentionally doing the same in our virtual platforms? Or are we just saying what we kick out is enough? Or are we intentionally seeking people to get involved? Just a bit more on telling your story through social media. As I said a few seconds ago, by sharing our narratives, our cultures, our values, we pass on and inspire to others. What's fascinating when we look at social media, and especially when you're looking into social media, you can't help but naturally gravitate towards millennials and Generation Z. People are more likely to follow a person than they are a church. So although we put stuff out as church, people want to know the person, and that's because at the core, we're relational beings, aren't we? It's relationship that's formed. And so when we're dealing with social media, we need to provide opportunities for people to get to know us as people and not a church as an organisation, making it personal. There's also a difference in the platforms you use with social media. So Twitter, Instagram and Facebook seem to be the most popular social media kind of avenues for this. But they've all got very different target audiences and they were created for different purposes. Often what we do and I'm guilty of this, is write one post and then just copy and paste it onto all the forums. Why do we do that? Because it's the quickest way to do it. But what we need to recognize is that different people use the different forums. So it's not as simple as just kicking something out and hoping it will land. Facebook, for example, more people over the age of 35 tend to use and engage more in Facebook. They tend to want to look at Facebook and want to start conversations on Facebook, comment on stuff. So you've got far more license to open up, explore more. You've got an unlimited word count that you can use, although I suggest you still limit it to what's in iView. When you're uploading a video onto Facebook, you have to make it longer than 2 minutes, because people traditionally look at Facebook when they're watching TV. So there's constantly, our eyes are looking up and down. So if the video is too short, they've scrolled past it. So therefore you need to think about the way you use Facebook. Twitter, you've only got 1 minute, 40 seconds for a video. You've only got 140 characters. It's hashtagging. People will look at the hashtag for a theme, for a trend, which is different to Facebook. And Instagram, without putting it too simply, is just all about pictures. You need a decent picture to encourage people in. Most people won't look at the comment unless the picture is a high quality. So the way we tell our stories through these mediums has to evolve in the way we communicate. And we're used to that in the way we've evolved in how we preach. But social media does serve as a useful platform. But don't be mistaken into thinking that social media is the answer and will automatically hit those under the age of 35 in particular, because there is a growing fatigue. We need to be so sophisticated in how we post and what we're communicating. For example, with Instagram, it's that one thing. What's the one message, the one thing you want to get across? You don't have the luxury of hundreds of photos. You have one thing to get across. I know as preachers, that's hard for us just to limit it to one point, but that's how we entice the story. So ways forward. How are you going to create this authentic virtual community, even if we're allowed back in church? I want to encourage you to assign an online pastor or deacon. Someone who every Sunday morning, every Thursday night, whenever you meet as a gathered community, is there doing the online stuff, broadcasting it, engaging with the social media. The one thing I'd encourage you not to lose as congregational leaders is the interaction you've now got with your congregation on a Sunday morning. But on a Sunday morning, you might be really busy preaching. So you need someone there that's going to facilitate those comments, bring them in, encourage. So an online pastor or deacon, that person could then set up an online home group, something like that, or small group, however you name them. You really need to invest in the virtual platform that reflects who you are. I would start, if you haven't already, getting a website. Websites don't need to be as complicated as putting all your church information on there, but just a shop window for who you are. Ask your key leaders to engage in social media. One of the biggest things that we've seen at this moment is people who were on the fringes of the church, for want of a better word, are peering into your services. People who come to your parent and toddler groups and would engage in the church Facebook page maybe because of that, now are looking in on your service. But they may not have a relationship with you. You may not be the one who turns up to parent and toddler every week. So get the leaders of every ministry, every group, every outreach to be on social media. They will then have a platform to share with others. They then inadvertently become their kind of online pastor, when you're leading larger churches or medium-sized churches, one helpful tool is to create an environment where home group leaders are almost like the mini pastors, because you as a pastor can't see where everyone is if you've got over 20 people on a Sunday morning. And so that happens, it's creating that emphasis in all your ministries online as well. They will act as that. Intentionally build that community as you would offline. Whenever you're in leaders meetings and you're thinking about doing something, think about how that would look online as well. How would that be to have a community fun day with an online presence? What would that look like? What does church look like? Create that space for engagement which bridges the gap. At the moment, we're bridging the gap between there's nothing there, so we have to provide. But once something is there, maybe on a Sunday morning, how do we bridge the gap for those that are quite comfortable in their living rooms and beds to engage in what we're doing? Constantly thinking. And of course, the biggest encouragement I've got for you is don't lose the ways you're communicating now. We know this pastorally. We've been engaging with people, and if we just stop that straight away, that's going to have a damaging effect on people. Because the online community is a valid community, if when you're able to meet back as physical church, you stop all that communication, you send out a message, meaning to or not, you don't care. That was just a means to an end. And so we need to bridge that gap in how we're communicating. So that's a huge whistle-stop tour of kind of creating a virtual community. So forgive me if I've bombarded you with a lot of information. But I don't know if there's anything in there that you maybe want to reflect on or share or any questions. Don't rush, you're fine.
Is everyone on mute?
Everyone's on mute, so if you unmute yourself when you want to speak, that'd be great.
I was really struck, Hayley, by the telling of the stories. I was just having a look through Facebook. Is there a way of, because obviously you can only put up the one picture of the church. It doesn't have space, does it, for being able to put in like the members and things like that, and the who's who, like you would on a website?
Oh, on a Facebook page?
Yeah.
No, but you could do a video or photo, who's who, and pin that as an opening post. So it's the first post that everyone sees.
Hayley, how do we check the retention figures?
If you go into your, yeah, don't. It's humbling, but if you go into YouTube, then under the statistics of the video, you've got it there. And there's different platforms. I think everything on Twitter, if it shows up as a view on Twitter, that means someone's looked at it for longer than 3 seconds. So all the platforms work on a slightly different way, but yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about the way in which the online communities are growing, and I think one of the challenges will be for and it's just something I'm thinking through, for the people that are accessing our services, who are finding it easier to do that than to walk through a door, because they could have been doing that but weren't, and so they're accessing it this way. Obviously at the moment, I know a lot of us, when we're preparing services or live streaming, it's all very much direct to camera. It's one-on-one, and many of us are trying to find informal ways of doing that. We're sat at a sofa or at our dining room table or whatever. We probably, in the future, when we're live streaming, because I think that technology and skill sets there, it's something we'll always do. But for people then who carry on joining us, that experience is going to be very different, because effectively they won't have that sat there looking directly at you kind of approach. And for me, I'm interested in other people's thoughts on how can we still involve them in the way that they have been enjoying and appreciating, so that they're not the sort of the flies on the wall, they're not the security camera view kind of thing, but are still valued and included and part of it. I think that's going to be a big challenge.
It is, and I think if you look at churches that broadcast online, really well, I'm talking the big churches, Hillsongs, all of that, their preachers preach to the camera. They don't actually preach to the congregation that are there. I'm not sure how congregations feel about that. I think that's a culture shift. I mean, they did that from day one type thing. So I think there's an argument in saying we will continue to do it in a different way. The same message, but in a different way. So, for example, one of the conversations I've had with my leadership here of the church I'm in is, even when we're able to go back, there will still be quite a high proportion that would be shielding or just don't feel comfortable yet going into a church service. And I do sermon on the sofa, unless it's sunny, and then I do God in the garden. But basically, I'm still going to do that. And that would be, and it will be a similar message, same theme, same. So it's doing it for different audiences, because I think you're right, they will lose that personal touch. That's just what's going to work for us. That won't necessarily work for everyone. And again, it's thinking, well, do we have to go back to preaching in the way we do? What if we all filmed it and everyone watched it and Sunday became something very different? I understand it's easy to say those things in this forum. I'm just thinking of leadership discussions that go on. But yeah, I think you're right. How do you maintain that personal contact is going to be hard if you just stick a camera in your service.
I'm finding your presentation very helpful and interesting, but there are two thoughts that I have. One is that we need to take particular care about developing our new generation of leaders and engaging with technology. And the other side of that is taking particular care to explain what we are proposing to do and giving a rationale for the way in which we might go forward into the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. Discipleship and how that happens is in emerging leaders will be very interesting in this times. I think it's really difficult to communicate sometimes to a church that don't get online community. I think the benefit is we're in a time now where I think even the most difficult of our church members understands the need for an online virtual community. And I think this is an opportunity that we wouldn't have been given in any other circumstance. But I think you're right, communication is key, and being mindful of how we equip and lead the future generations. Thank you.
And I think this is one of the challenges that there will be perhaps for us. I think one of the reflections, again, with talking to a number of church leaders, is that actually there are benefits at the minute, not just for those who've not been part of the church, but the story I hear again and again is that people within the church are feeling more connected than ever before. And I wonder if some of that is because whilst we know that the church is not the building, so much of our stuff is program focused that takes place in a particular place that requires other people to go there to where it is. And what we're seeing with the online is suddenly it's the opportunity for people to experience church in some way where they are. Now, when churches are open again, is the natural response we'll have to make everything back at the building again. And the challenge is to say, actually, it's wider than being online in one sense. It's actually about saying, what is our focus going to be? Is our focus all about expecting people to gather where we are, or are we going to be the church going out to where people are? And online is one part of that, but it can go wider than that as well. But I just think that's going to be a real challenge for us, because our natural way of thinking is to get back to the building stuff and get people into the building again.
I think we saw some of that with the excitement on Sunday about the private worship restrictions possibly being lifted, and was that going to be for Wales as well? That sort of buzz around being able to gather again, and there's something natural about that. You know, we're our fellowship, we're our family, but if the focus is just sort of surviving until we can, then I think you're right. We will have missed a much wider opportunity, definitely.
Is it a question of either or an and? Bearing in mind that, you know, what is the church for? Is to help people connect to God, and we still have people in their 70s and 80s for whom the hymn prayer sandwich, you know, is relevant for them. And then you come to, you know, 60s, 50s maybe, for whom the contemporary is relevant, and who actually are looking forward to being able to connect within that community, and who will, in a sense, use that platform for their discipling. But then also we've got the new group, if you like, and I just wonder, you know, is this something we need to add as opposed to something we need to jump onto?
I think you're right, and it's difficult, isn't it? It's like if you was just starting up a church from scratch now, it might look very different. But I think in the churches we all serve, there's a stream of views and what people like, and I think you're right. It's not chuck out one for the other. It's seeing how they can combine, but seeing them as equally valid. I think for me, in my experience in my previous church, we had this kind of tension that all churches have of you know, worship styles, and some people liking the hymn sandwich, some people liking something more like cafe worship, something, and we deliberately divided the church into separate congregations, but under the same vision, and in order to grow, because actually if those groups would reach out to groups that would appeal to that service and so forth. And I suppose we could argue the same is true of an online community. Actually, is it separate but still part of the same vision? And how does it bridge the gap? And those types of conversations are down to your church and leadership. Whether you throw everything out and go with this, whether you try and combine the two, or whether you ignore it, I guess, is down to an individual church.
I think, like some of the other people who've got an older congregation, that there are some particular challenges. I mean, for those who don't know me, I'm at Raglan Baptist Church, where we're a congregation of about 30 with maybe another 15 or 20 who join us occasionally. And the leadership of the church is mostly older. So when Hayley was sort of talking about having a pastor who would manage all of the online stuff, there is only one of those. You're looking at her, you know, there isn't anybody else. So it's taken me 3 months to persuade one of our leadership team, who's in her late 70s, to join us on Zoom by telephone, because she's convinced that something dreadful is going to happen to her computer if she actually puts the video on. So, you know, we're at that kind of stage, and probably we've got about 8 people who are not able to access anything online at all, even an email. So I think the challenge for me at the minute, what I'm thinking about, and I've only been the pastor there since last October, is to kind of look at a sort of multi-layered church where we can have some common elements and use them in different ways. So we've not gone for live streaming because we just haven't had the capability, but we put something online every week that's based around I suppose you just call it an interactive PDF. You know, I produce it in a document which I save as PDF, and I put all the links in it, so people will then choose what they want to watch. So there's links for the songs, there's links for my message for the week, there's links to the reflections and that kind of thing. So it's looking now about how we get people to come and join us. They've just started doing Zoom coffee in the last couple of weeks. That was a big step forward. So now we're looking at doing a Zoom service. But I don't think I'm going to preach my sermon again. I'm going to ask them if they would actually listen to it or read the summary that's on the service sheet. And I'm thinking of doing some discussional stuff in the Zoom service when we start doing it, not repeating what we've done before, because they're quite capable of discussing, actually, as long as they're given permission not to. So it's looking at how I can kind of multi-layer what we've got, and can I then put some of what I've got in sort of live input onto our Facebook page. I've not put video on Facebook, although I use Facebook an awful lot for all sorts of things. So I'm trying to create like a multi-layered church that people can get into whatever layer they want, but one where the layers connect and one where people can move between different parts, if you understand me, different layers. Bible study, actually, what I'd done, because our Sunday message is actually quite short and not in as much depth, I've actually developed a midweek Bible study that also goes out with a video guiding, so that people can download it on the interactive PDF and then they can have the video to guide them through. And that's actually in more depth and more reflection. So, it's just another way of doing what we used to do. But that's just like, that's a solution for a small church. It's very, very low tech and not particularly exciting, but it does seem to have some advantages.
I'm in a very similar situation to Carol. I'm also a lecturer at the university, and in the last 4 months, the way we've done things as a university has changed completely, in the sense that location doesn't matter anymore. Our students have gone home, so they're distributed basically all around the world. One of the things we struggle at as a church is not so much engaging the older members, but we have relatively few young people. Is this something we could do as a union, given that location is not so important anymore, to look at how we could help build our young people into a coherent group across the whole region?
Yeah, definitely. By young people, you mean under kind of 21, under 18?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can definitely pass it on to Emma, not that I'm passing the buck. Emma is the Regional Minister of Oversight for Children, Youth and Families. She's did a session last week on lessons from lockdown with children, youth and families kind of focus. That's online. If you've not seen it, do catch up on that, because it's really fruitful. But yeah, we'll definitely pass that on as something that could be explored. Yeah, pass that on.
Thank you.
I think I've noticed several people talking about this age, that age, the other age, and well, of course, we've got old people. As somebody who's over 70, I hope we can actually forget about the age brackets to some extent. I mean, Martin Gillard, who's my pastor, they've done some great stuff on online for Sundays, and I might be over 70, but I love it. And in fact, I was talking to one of the congregation only this morning, saying I hope that after lockdown we can find some ways of integrating some of the exciting things they're doing online, so we don't lose it. And I was hearing on the radio the other day, there are people who are disabled who never get to church, who, regardless of their age, are suddenly finding that they are far more included in church now than they have been for years, because they're there every Sunday. And so, don't let's get too compartmentalized.
Yeah, I think you're right. Forgive me. It's helpful sometimes to break it down because we see trends in ages. But I think you're right. I think, you know, in my church we had our oldest member log on to our Zoom service on Sunday and loved every minute of it. So yeah, we see these trends in ages, but ultimately what we want is an intergenerational church, don't we, that reflects God's kingdom. And I think, thank you for reminding us that point of inclusion of those living with disabilities has been remarkable in this season. And yeah, we definitely don't want to lose that. That's brilliant. Thank you.
I've got 2 questions just to put to the group, see what other people think. The first is, when we get back into our buildings, are you going to broadcast the service live, or are you going to edit, record, and then broadcast later? What's the general feeling on that?
Okay, should we put, if you can find your thumbs up tool on the reactions at the bottom of the screen. So if you're going to broadcast your service live, can you put a thumb up? Okay, so a few people. If you're going to pre-record something and put that out, well, can you put your thumb up? Okay, there's a few people unsure. I think 3 people.
I was going to say, at the moment, we're at Tabernacle Penarth. Correct me, Jack and Kath, if I'm wrong on this. We haven't made a decision, but it's one of those situations where, at the moment, our services are recorded and edited together with a talk that is 10 to 15 minutes long. Going back into a traditional service, will that still be there? It's a question we haven't resolved yet. At leadership, what we will do, we are pretty sure, I think, that we will do both, but how it's done, we're not sure. We're not convinced yet. Go on, Jack.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, we're reaching, you know, far broader than our congregation. When we were just confined within the walls of the building, we can see the numbers are far bigger in terms of views, and we're reaching more people. We're getting interaction from those people as well. So we know that it is blessing our community and beyond. So it's something we would be really reluctant to stop doing our online services, but we know that the technical challenge of going back into the building and streaming from there, whilst maintaining the quality levels we can in being able to, you know, quite often in our worship, we'll have a few different musicians contributing different bits and we edit it together. And it's a lot of work from a lot of people who are currently on furlough and won't be able to give their skills indefinitely. But we've got a certain level of quality that we would really love to maintain, just to be giving, you know, striving for excellence in everything we do. But we know that the technical shift going to online streaming from the church building is going to be a whole like starting from scratch all over again. So it's a huge challenge, and one I think we're not really sure how the best way to proceed and when to make that switch, how much to stagger it. These are all things we're going to have to think about very carefully to make sure that we don't lose the I guess the wider congregation, I suppose, that has built up throughout lockdown.
I'd say the same as that. I think it's just, I was looking for one of the little icons that said, I don't know, because yeah, I think with you, it's just too early to say. We're still exploring so much. And I think there are so many issues here. The issue of safety is a massive one, you know, it's, and it could get pushed back again. So what we're trying to do at the moment, I found it really, really difficult to work out actually what's going on in the church because of the people in all the different sections. So some of the young people, you know, really struggling. We haven't really seen, we've got very active 18 to 30s groups. Haven't really seen them in the larger gatherings. They do their own gatherings. Now, I'm not bothered about that as long as there's community going on. I don't think it all has to be together. I'm fine with that. But it has really sort of made the spectrum of the church much more pronounced. So what we're doing at the moment is we're trying to do a survey right across, because we have got older people who don't have any sort of internet connection. So we're doing a survey right across just to find out where people are at. What are they using? Are they going to other churches? Not a problem. It's just good to know. They may be, I'm sure they're getting better teaching, but it's just trying to get a handle on that. And what we're going to do then, we've realized that we need to look at online in terms of the wider church and our vision. Fortunately, about 2 years ago, we spent a lot of time doing our values. So we've got a set of values, and we thought, right, whatever we do online, it must come out of our values. Otherwise, we're heading to a problem down the road. So actually, it's tomorrow night we're having a trustees meeting to really work the way forward on this. So the plan is to do the survey, to send the survey out, to send out the vision, which we've called, basically it's a pencil roadmap. I saw a great quote the other day that said that they're doing everything in pencil at the moment. I think that's very wise, because you're going to have to rub things out and do it. But it is a roadmap. People want to know, well, what's happening. And basically the vision there would be to focus on the life groups and make sure everybody's connecting groups. So when we do get the building back at some point for small group gatherings, that's where the connections can take place. And the other thing we're doing when we send that out is letting people realize that church is not going to happen again for a very long time and may never look like it did. And as leaders, we're already there, aren't we? But a lot of people are still holding on to, oh, I'll be glad when I can get back and we can hug for coffee. And you're like, yeah, that could be after I've left. So, sorry, I'm going on a bit here, but this is very useful for me because we're on the cusp of it now. So the plan is to write 3 strategies out of our values: an online strategy, a mission strategy, which has to reflect the local area, because we are getting take-up from groups in the local area, which we've never had before, but also how do we deal with this wider group and online Bible studies and stuff. So an online strategy, a life group strategy, and a mission strategy for this time. And then I don't feel there's any rush in this. In fact, I don't want to rush. So what I'll be looking for is members of the trustees who can attend to those 3 areas. And that's why I wasn't able to say, I don't know, the live streaming. At the moment, we record a 20-minute maximum thing earlier in the week. Our complication is we have a deaf couple with us, and we have a bit of a ministry to the deaf. So everything has to be signed and subtitled. There's a lot of video editing there. We've got people who can do that. So the whole live streaming thing is, but that's actually brought more people in. Anyway, so we send that out at the same time, at 10:30, 20 minutes, the message at first, the welcome and the message, and then a bit of music or worship. And then we have a Zoom gathering, which is just coffee Zoom. So that's working for us at the moment, we think, which is why we're going to do the survey. Sorry about the long there.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Nick, Bradshaw, did you want to come in earlier?
Yeah, just, in terms of that vote, I mean, we don't live stream at the moment, and I have no intention of doing so during lockdown, but I do have every intention of doing so when we're back. It's just, just that overwhelming recognition of how many people can be included that have been excluded in the past, members of our congregation that are shut in, as a part of us again for the first time for years and years. It's a no-brainer as well in Penarth, where we've got so many homes for the elderly. We've got, 2 opposite us and 1 next door. It just seems obvious that that's a thing that we need to look into in terms of live streaming into those places, or maybe recording and sending it at another time. But that does seem an obvious thing going forward. But in a sense, that's just playing to the strength that the congregation at the moment is fairly traditional, and it's a generalized statement, but those in older accommodation and therefore age profile are more likely to want to look in that way. What is intriguing that I just don't know the answer to is that numbers of people that are watching what I'm putting out at the moment that would never find a home in our church congregation as it is at the moment, but for other reasons, you know, they're related to me mainly, but for whatever reason are watching. So that, I think that's another question entirely, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier in terms of understanding your audience and what you're putting out. Problem is with that is how can you keep it up, you know? I'm finding it's taking, I'm only part-time, but it's a good job I can't do much in my other part-time roles. I'm able to devote more to the local church, which is really devoting time to editing and getting people online and so on. And I suspect that when we are allowed out and allowed into people's homes to visit, it won't be partial visiting, it will be technical setting people up for this. So.
No, thank you. That's great. I'm very aware of time. So has anyone got anything burning that they've not yet shared or asked?
Can I ask a second question? And that is on the issue of safeguarding, particularly if you've got children in the service.
In what regard? So children in the service as in partaking? Or?
Yeah, sharing in the service. Maybe you've got a family time, a children's time, children's songs.
If it's being live streamed, you mean?
Yeah.
I think it would, you'd need parental permission in order for them to be on any live stream. Some churches are doing that. At the moment, the kids are getting involved, that the parents are there. There is some guidelines on the Baptist Union website, which is on our website as well, about safeguarding of children and young people within online services. I must admit, it's not something that I'm massively aware of. So what I will do is I will speak to Emma, obviously our children's youth family. She's got a safeguarding hat that she wears as well, and I'll put something on our website about what that is. I think it's if you've got parents' permission, you'll be okay. But I'll just double check on that one for you, if that's okay. So Mark, did you know anything more about safeguarding?
Not very much more. I know that some churches where they do live stream, if there are certain sections where you're more likely to be seen, they will also have a place where they say, if you don't want to be seen, go to this place in the church. But I think a lot of it is about making sure you get permission for those who are coming up. And some churches, I think, stream different parts of the service. So some join part way through after they might have done a family bit as well.
And of course, if you look at some of the bigger churches, the Hillsongs, the HTBs, all of that, and actually Bethel in Pontyclean, the filming is of the pulpit, the stage only. It doesn't show you any of the congregation. So there's a zoom in on those that know they're on camera. But yeah, I'll double check just in case. But that's cool. Well, thank you all so much for your time. If anything crops up, you think, oh, I want to speak about that, or I think I misheard that, then do get in contact with me. I'm quite findable on social media or on the website, the association website. So thank you all for your time. As we started in prayer, I'm just going to ask that we end in prayer. John, Davis, you okay to close in prayer for us?
Yeah, great. Let's pray.